how can we learn from the life and leadership beyond the bus about Rosa Parks? That's what we're going to be discussing on Flourish-Meant today. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Flourish-Meant is sponsored by Access More. Today, I have with me an amazing leader. Her name is H. Leonards. She's a wife, a mother of three, and founder of O Museum in the mansion in Washington, D.C., where Mrs. Rosa Parks, her friends and business associates, lived with her at no cost as part of the mansion and O Museum's Heroes in Residence program. Welcome, H. I am so delighted to have you on Flourish-Meant today.
I am honored to share this time with you and the people that are listening. So thank you so much for the invitation.
So tell us what inspired you to bring about more of the story of Rosa Parks beyond the bus.
When Mrs. Parks came to live with me when she was 81 after she had been severely assaulted in her home in Detroit, they had told me that she didn't want anyone to know that she was staying with us. She needed privacy to heal spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So I kept that promise for years and years, even after she passed, because I have this, you shake someone's hand and a deal's a deal. And then the Library of Congress in 2019 was doing a one-woman show of all her papers and her life history. And they came to me and said that they had heard that she had stayed with us because they saw letters from her and they saw photographs of me with her and the Pope. And would I please write the story about who she was, not a historical book, but a book about her soul and about her heart. So I said, yes. And that's the evolution of the book.
I can't wait to hear the things that you learned from your time with Rosa Parks, because a woman who would bring that kind of pioneering step with the story we all know about, the story of having the courage to do what we know she did on the bus. We know there's got to be more to this woman than that famous story we've all heard in school. Tell us, what were some of the things that really brought your attention to who she was as a person and the things that you loved the most about her?
So I did not know who she was for about 3 years. I was a very bad student. She came to me, she needed a roof over her head and she needed loving care. We bonded through our talk about faith, God, and family, and that love was all that mattered. So our conversations were never about the civil rights movement or social justice. They were about taking care of those that were in greater need than you were, no matter what your circumstances were. And 3 years later, when I found out, I was really embarrassed and humiliated, actually, and I asked her forgiveness. And she said, this is what God wanted, because we wouldn't have become friends if you had known who I was, because I'm always leery of people being around because I'm famous. You approached me from your heart, so I thank you for that. So she was also filled with grace when she accepted my apology, which was an extraordinary woman. And she also never answered questions right away. She thought about them. She took the time to make sure that each word that she chose was carefully done, also with grace. So I think one of the first lessons she taught me was every morning she would say, surprise me, Lord, lead me where you need me. And she used that every day of her life, but also when things happen to you that you think are the worst things that could ever happen, and everyone reacts to bad things in a different way. She taught me how to react to the times when you are on your feet. You've been knocked down, by forgiving everyone, everything when you go to sleep at night. In the morning, remembering to forgive yourself, and then always getting out of bed with a smile on your face.
Those are such powerful lessons. Did this come to you before you even knew who she was as a historical figure, or did you learn these after you understood her place in history and that she was a celebrity that had been staying with you?
From the day she came, she was very frail. They wheeled her in a wheelchair, and she reached out her hand and touched mine, and I could feel her strength and her power, her inner strength, her love. Sometimes you don't have to speak words, but from the very beginning, she started teaching me the lessons. Sometimes you don't understand what's being taught to you, but I think you're more open to learning when you don't know who people are, and you look at who they are within their hearts and not what they've done or how much money they have or any of those things. It's a real bond when you just meet people from their essence.
I feel like you knew who she was more because you didn't know her as a public figure.
Exactly. So it was a blessing not being a very smart student.
You were a better student in the end because you were not a good student in school. If you had known who she was, you might not have learned those lessons. Have you thought about it that way?
That's a very good point, and you're exactly right.
What were some of the first things that she began to do when you brought her into her home that struck you as this woman is different than other women that I've known in my life?
She withdrew into herself after suffering great pain. She was so badly assaulted in Detroit that her pacemaker was dislodged. She did not want anyone to know what had happened to her. So she had everyone in the hospital in Detroit sign a non-disclosure agreement that she was never there because she didn't want the children of the world to be frightened that they might be assaulted in their homes like she was with the Klan when she was growing up. But to be so physically assaulted and to have a frame of mind to think of somebody else is really part of her healing process. A huge lesson to everybody. When bad things happen to you, reach out to those that are in greater need. But what she did was she withdrew into herself until she was able to heal spiritually first, then emotionally, and then physically. And she thought for months and months who she wanted to become when she went back out to the public again. So no one knew how she was suffering except for the closest cadre of people that were sworn to secrecy that lived with me. But when she started walking outside, she never left the house without security. So she forgave, but she didn't forget. She was very careful the rest of her life, but she did more things in the last 10 years of her life than she had ever done before. She felt it was so important to meet people all the time, to have them shake her hand so they could understand, don't be fearful of me. I come to you in love. I come to you with understanding. Another huge lesson.
So she was a leader because she received healing first. I think that's such an important lesson for all of us. Everyone goes through crises, heartbreak, maybe not to the level of being beaten half to death when you're 81 years old, but you do go through things that make you feel battered at times. And I love that lesson that she withdrew and received Jesus. It reminds me of that modeling that Jesus did, where he withdrew to a lonely place to receive time with the Father before he went forward in his ministry. And that is her exemplifying that in her life. That's just so powerful. And when she touched you, did you recognize that this woman was a leader, even though she was frail?
She was a muse, so that her essence would flow through her hands. So it wasn't necessary for her to speak all the time because she was so extraordinary that everything would come through just simply holding hands. I learned from her also that you don't need to talk all the time. It's enough just to sit together and hold hands, because that's love. And sometimes words get in the way of those emotions. But whenever she would ask me to write something for her, we would hold hands in silence for sometimes hours. And then she would ask me to put something down on paper that I was feeling through her. And so it was an extraordinary, deep friendship, very unusual, but very giving. There were no one, it was incredible. And it can be what everyone feels with everyone if everyone opens their hearts and allows themselves to just sit in silence, share time.
So she taught the art of listening to a person's heart, not just their words. That's a beautiful lesson. I love that. And that is extraordinary. It's rare that people will listen to a person's heart and take that time. I think that's a tremendous sacrifice, wouldn't you say, to take the time to be still and silent and just listen with someone?
Yes.
So she taught you not to always speak. She taught you the grace of receiving healing and then offering forgiveness. What were some other really important things that first struck you about her before you knew who she was?
Her grooming and deportment was very important to her. She felt it was very important that how she dressed and how she appeared didn't insult anyone. So I never saw her in dressed casually. She always took care to make sure that whenever she left her room, even if she wasn't expecting to meet the President of the United States or the Secretary of State here, that she looked appropriate so that they could use nothing against her mission and her vision. The other thing that was quite amazing about her is she taught everyone around her that, and sometimes it was a lesson people did not want to hear, but that it was important that you led an exemplary life. If you didn't do that, at some point in your life, your past would be used against you. And I went to several meetings with people where she had those delicate conversations. She did that gracefully. Sometimes the receiver listened, and many times they didn't, which was sad because years later, we watched their lives and their families be destroyed. So that was such an important lesson. And she would teach that to the children that she taught to all the time. Again, they might not have understood it when she was speaking, but I think eventually things do kick in if you hear it from enough people, which is why my book is so important, because it's not about me, it's about the lessons she taught. And her time is now more than as much as it was back in 1950 when she refused to give up her seat on the bus.
So speaking of your book, how can people find a copy of your book? I want you to mention those places where they can get in touch with you and get a copy of your book, because it's so much of a wealth of important information that everybody can benefit from.
omuseum.org. You'll see a whole section on Mrs. Parks, and right at the top is how you order the book. You can go to rhboyd.com. They're the publisher out of Nashville, the oldest African-American publishing company in the United States, 125 years. And it's run by fifth generation Boyds, and it's a woman in her 30s, which is also wonderful and unusual. And it was the perfect place to publish Mrs. Parks's book. She would have loved it. And then you can obviously go to Amazon.
What a beautiful testimony, a great ministry you have. I hope that all of you listening will contact H.H. Leonards and the O Museum and learn all of the beautiful and priceless wisdom that they have to reveal there. And of course, I also hope that you come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.